Fiona was excited as she got ready for her date. This was her third date with Carl, and all the signs were good that Carl was going to get lucky for the first time tonight. She was feeling anticipation building within her. As she put the last of her makeup on, she thought about the first 2 dates. She'd met Carl when she went out almost a month ago with her friend Rachel. They had been planning on having just a quiet night to celebrate Rachel's birthday. However, when the 2 handsome guys bought them drinks and very persistently made their intentions of getting to know them better apparent, things had changed. Rachel cracked first, and with a look at Fiona for approval, agreed to a couple of dances. That left Fiona with Carl. He was a perfect gentleman throughout the 4 dances she allowed him. It seemed natural that the 4 of them shared the table when they all returned. She had absolutely no idea what Rachel and her guy talked about. She had eyes only for Carl. He was handsome, witty, and a good 5 years younger than her. But the most alluring thing about him was that he made her the center of his universe. While she was in his presence, she had his undivided attention. It was very flattering. By the end of the evening, she was seriously considering relaxing her long-held standards never to spend the night with a guy she didn't love. She knew she would regret that later, and it sent wholly the wrong message. Fortunately, Carl relieved her of that problem by calling an end to the night. He explained that he had an early start at work the next day. Perfect gentleman that he was, he settled both girls' tabs for them before leading them out to Fiona's car. He drew her in for a short kiss on the lips, then bid her good night. She was a little surprised when Rachel announced she was going home with Carl's friend to his apartment. She knew Rachel had lower standards than she did, but this was still unusual behavior. Fiona returned home alone, very excited, with anticipation of the future. Once out of Carl's mesmeric presence, her natural cynicism allowed the first crack to appear in her dream. What were the odds that someone as good as Carl was unattached? She had automatically checked for a wedding ring and been relieved by its absence, but she couldn't help remembering the cynic's mantra. Girls, if you meet a single guy who is handsome, muscular, attentive, and sensitive, don't waste your time. He no doubt already has a boyfriend. However, she knew Carl wasn't gay. When she danced closely with him during that last song, she could tell he was just as interested. She would never normally be so presumptuous during a first meeting, but she instinctively knew that she couldn't let this one get away. With her obvious interest in Carl, an impartial observer may have been confused as to why she didn't agree on a second date with him until 11 days later. He had called at least every second day and obviously returned her attraction. Her second date was again with Rachel and was in the same bar as last time. Carl and his friend were already there. He greeted Fiona with a very friendly kiss, and again the foursome split into 2 pairs at the same table. It was half an hour later that Fiona managed to pull away from his animal magnetism and closeness to examine his left hand. A shudder of disappointment went through her as she saw the faint shadow on his ring finger. "You're married, you lying jerk. I knew you were too good to be true." "Oh, you mean this," said Carl, holding up his ring finger. "I was married until 6 months ago, but unfortunately it failed. As it is winter and I have an office job, the paleness has yet to be tanned out." Relieved and a little afraid of the damage her outburst may have done to their burgeoning relationship, Fiona quickly apologized. She then just as quickly decided to use all her charms to repair any damage. Dragging Carl onto the dance floor, she stepped in to dance closely with him. He accepted her apology by leaning down and pulling her in for a kiss. They ended up dancing and kissing until the bar closed at midnight. Neither had any idea when Rachel and Carl's friend had left, but their table was empty when they finally returned. Fiona was caught in a dilemma almost as old as time itself. She really wanted to ensnare Carl by taking him to her bed right now. The relief from her feelings would be a secondary benefit of that. However, she wasn't interested in just a short-term fling. By giving in tonight, she knew she risked losing his respect if he was interested in a longer-term relationship. She decided he would have to work harder for his reward. Besides, That would allow him to further demonstrate his need for her. Nothing stroked her ego like being chased by a virile man. It was at least as good a thrill as the first romantic encounter with a new partner. After gently letting him down, she allowed him again to escort her to her car. This time they passionately kissed goodnight. Proud of her self-control, she returned home. Over the next 2 weeks, Fiona basked in the glow of being pursued. Carl rang her a minimum of once a day. Every second or third day, he sent either flowers or chocolates to her office. That was one of the reasons she didn't agree to a third date until 15 days after the second. She sensed Carl was becoming despondent of his chances. Desperate not to lose him, she immediately agreed to a date. Now, here she was, sitting at her makeup table wondering whether tonight was going to be the night. This time there was no Rachel, and they met at a different bar. Fiona knew she was running a risk when she asked him again if he was married. She prefaced the question as her not believing that such a hot guy was available. She saw a flicker in his eye that she interpreted as meaning that he had been hurt by her question. She immediately gave him her best kiss. "Look, Fee, how can I prove to you that I'm not?" "Easy. We'll dance for a while, then you can take me back to your place." Any misgivings Carl may have held rapidly blew away, and he drew her in for another smoldering kiss. At a table at the other end of the bar, Tom observed the intimate couple closely. He hadn't observed this couple interact before. He judged with an eye tuned by years of watching couples. Third date, I reckon. She's just told him he's going to score tonight. He would follow them tonight just to confirm his judgment. If he was lucky, they might be together somewhere he could not only watch, but take some photos and videos for his growing collection. With that anticipation, his heart raced. On the dance floor, the happy couple had almost given up all pretense of sticking to the beat of the music in favor of embracing and kissing deeply. A mere 45 minutes after they had arrived, Carl hustled Fiona out to his car and drove her away. Tom was already waiting in his own car and with practiced ease followed them to an apartment a mere 10 minutes drive away. Fiona stood impatiently while Carl fumbled to find the right key to open the door. He finally managed it with the third one. Fiona was breathing heavily with anticipation. Once the door was closed and the happy couple were inside, Tom strolled from his place of concealment behind a tree on the street and made his way around to the back of the 3-apartment block. With experience, he looked around at the high wooden fences surrounding the block and judged that he wouldn't be observed in his spying. He could see through the partially opened curtains, through the darkened bedroom into the lounge. Carl and Fiona were in the midst of removing each other's clothes. Tom opened his belt bag and retrieved his video camera. He was disappointed that the action was in the lounge, but realized it could have been far worse. The curtains might have been closed. He recorded their intimate encounter that followed. At the window, Tom thought this was priceless. For less than 5 minutes of his time, he had captured everything on tape. He was even more excited when the happy couple moved into the bedroom and turned the bedside light on, but didn't close the curtains. He stepped away from the light escaping through the curtains until he judged from experience that they were fully occupied again. He had just confirmed that Carl had Fiona on her back when he heard it, the distinctive snap of a dry twig breaking under someone's stealthy foot. He backed into the shadows while judging that the noise had come from the brush about 10 meters to his left. It was an occupational hazard of his activities that he sometimes wasn't the only watcher. It never failed to embarrass him, though. He wasn't particularly proud of what he did. Frozen in the shadows, Tom sensed another figure approaching the dim pool of light he'd just vacated. Soon, the figure of another man stood in the light and peered into the window. As soon as the full light from the bedroom hit his face, Tom grinned. "Hi, Greg." Instinctively, Greg crouched below the windowsill and peered into the shadows. "Tom, you almost gave me a heart attack. What in the world are you doing here?" "Same as you, Greg. Same as you," Tom replied. "Any good?" Greg asked. "Yeah, fantastic. You missed the first part in the lounge, but they've just moved here to the bedroom." "Any video?" Greg asked. Sure have. I'll give you a copy if you like. That would be great, Tom, Greg answered. Greg peered through the crack in the curtain and grinned. Excuse me, I just have to make a phone call, Greg answered. As his fellow peeper retreated to make the call, Tom once again returned to the crack with his camera rolling, once again thinking of his good fortune. This would be one of the best items in his collection. By the time Greg got back, the couple was fully engaged. When Greg returned, Tom kindly made the room so they could both video the action. In whispers and with an expert eye, they shared views on Carl's performance. It must have been about 15 minutes later when they were both startled by a pounding on the apartment door, clearly audible even at the back of the building. Their reaction was nothing to Fiona and Carl's. They separated with looks of confusion and both hurriedly started dressing. Carl finished first, even with difficulty getting dressed quickly. Greg and Tom watched as Carl left the bedroom and disappeared from view at the front door. Mere seconds later, they were astonished to see him flying backwards and landing in the center of the lounge. Very soon afterward, a large, obviously angry woman raced over to stand over the recumbent lover, laying into him with gusto with a short mini-league baseball bat. Carl's screams came faintly through the glass. When she tired of this, the formidable woman turned her attention to the bedroom. Fiona nearly got the door closed but was no match for the bigger woman. She retreated backward until the bed hit her knees and she fell back on it. With a snarl, the strange woman repeated her performance and laid into Fiona with a will. Both peepers could plainly hear the screams and the interspersed commentary of "home wrecker," "inappropriate woman," and "my husband." The videos had been good before, but now both Tom and Greg knew they would be taking pride of place in their collections. Tom could see that no real damage was being done with the dense foam bat. Obviously bored, the woman stopped her beating and returned to the front door. Greg sprinted around the block, followed by Tom. Neither wanted to miss a second of this drama. Greg got to the front door just as the large woman opened it and came out, throwing it over her shoulder. If your friend John knew why you were using his apartment, then you'd better tell him to start running as well. When she heard his reply, she turned and strode back through the door. This was the opportunity Fiona had been waiting for. She bolted out the door and ran full tilt into Tom standing at the gate. Bouncing off, she reached both hands forwards to grab him. This was a reflex to stop herself falling over backwards again. Quick as a flash, Tom grabbed one of her arms with one of his, but used the other to thrust the envelope into her free hand. With obvious amusement, he stated, "Fiona Brown, you have been served. Your husband requests your immediate presence at his house." Fiona rushed past him and screamed off down the street. Tom returned his attention to the entertainment still playing out in the house. Greg strolled over. "Nicely done, Tom. Short and sharp," Greg answered. "Yeah, the husband authorized me to do it as soon as I had the evidence. Poor lady, it was her first time. Talk about unlucky." "Oh well, these things happen. Don't forget the video you owe me," Greg replied. At this point, the formidable lady came out the door again and walked up to Greg. "Did you get what I wanted?" "Sure did," Greg replied. "Who's this guy? I'm not paying for two of you, you know." "That's fine. We private investigators always work alone. Tom here has just served your husband's girlfriend," Greg replied. "Good. That saves me the job of finding his address and sending him the video." She returned to the door and yelled inside. "You may as well stay here, jerk. Certainly don't bother coming home. You don't live there anymore." 200 meters away, Fiona was still accelerating. It finally dawned on her that it would take her a good hour and a half to walk back to her car. In the heels she was wearing, that would be a big ask. There was no way she was going anywhere near the apartment and that frightening woman again. Her racing, overloaded brain finally remembered her phone, but she quickly found it had been a casualty of her beating. Sobbing, with envelope in hand, she limped into the night. It ended up taking 2.5 hours to get back to her car and drive home. She was confused. Why did her husband want her to go back to their house? He was away on one of the business trips he took every 2 weeks or so. Bruised, battered, tired, and sore, she noticed the lights were all on. She fumbled her house key in the lock on the front door. She must be tired. She couldn't get it to go in the hole. The noise alerted her husband, and he opened the door, standing to the side to let her stagger in. "What are you doing home, honey?" she started. "Who is this?" The attractive but stern-looking lady sitting on her couch arose and approached the silent pair. "I am Mary Vermont, from Child Services. Do you know it is entirely inappropriate to leave a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old child alone for—" She glanced at her watch. "4 hours? I'm afraid I'll have to report this disgusting situation to the relevant authorities. I have here an interim order that precludes you from having sole custody of your children. The order remains in place for 28 days or until overturned by a family court magistrate." Rather than accept the proffered paper, Fiona collapsed to the floor. The extent of her husband's ministrations was to roll her into the recovery position to prevent her from swallowing her tongue in her swoon. He couldn't have worn a more distasteful expression when he touched her if he'd been scooping up something unpleasant with his bare hands. There was a knock at the door. Fiona's husband admitted her mother, who looked at her prostrate daughter with concern, but made no move towards her. "Is what you said on the phone right?" her mother asked. "Yes, Mum. Tonight was at least the second night that she has left the kids home alone while she went out. The first time I only found out when the lady next door rang me. Rita had woken up with a nightmare and wouldn't stop until she saw her mum. Jenny went next door to get help. The lady came over and settled Rita and stayed until Fiona got home after midnight. When she heard Fiona coming, she snuck out the back door. She rang me the next day. I rang Child Services and we set up a fake business trip for this week. Mary noted what time Fiona left and confirmed there was no babysitter. Don't worry, the girls knew I wasn't far away, and I came back as soon as Fiona left. I was also tipped off by Rachel's husband that they were up to no good. We are sharing a lawyer, he explained. I can confirm all that, Mrs. Smith. We already have a statement off the neighbor, and tomorrow we will get one from her friend, added Mary. I'm afraid tonight I had her followed by a private investigator who filmed her leaving a bar, going to some guy's house and having relations with him, he continued. Fiona's mum digested all this with a look of mounting horror. The other two let her process. Finally, she spoke. I know you well enough that you will never forgive her this. Honestly, I don't think I will ever forgive her either. I am so embarrassed that a child of mine would do anything remotely like this. Don't worry, Mum. None of this reflects on you. Please feel free to visit your grandchildren as often as you like. They will need some stability after the shock of all this hits. She can stay on my medical insurance for the time being. She'll at least need counseling. Please forgive me in advance for not giving her much in the divorce. I will need it all if I take a reduction in hours or hire a nanny. Now let me help you get her into your car. Actually, before we do that, can you ladies confirm that she already has extensive bruising to her legs, arms, and face? Yes, Dave, the two women replied in unison. 5 years later. Dave smiled as he watched his daughters playing in the yard with their stepbrother. At 10 and 8, Rita and Jenny were growing into beautiful, confident young women, while 3-year-old Max was all energy and laughter. They're getting along so well, came a warm voice from behind him. Sarah, his wife of 3 years, wrapped her arms around his waist and rested her chin on his shoulder. Best decision I ever made was hiring you as their nanny, Dave said, turning to kiss her forehead. Sarah had entered their lives during the chaos following the divorce. A childhood education specialist with a gentle nature and infinite patience, she had helped the girls through their confusion and hurt. Dave had found himself drawn to her steadiness, her wisdom, and her genuine love for his daughters. Court day tomorrow, Sarah reminded him gently. Are you ready? Dave nodded. The final hearing to formalize the custody arrangement was scheduled for tomorrow. After years of supervised visitation, Fiona had finally gotten her life together. The counseling had helped, and she'd been sober for 2 years now. She had a stable job, a modest apartment, and a new perspective on what mattered. "I think we're doing the right thing," he said, taking Sarah's hand. "The girls need their mother in their lives, even if it's just weekends and holidays." After their marriage fell apart, Dave had been consumed with anger. He'd wanted Fiona to suffer for her betrayal, for abandoning their children. But over time, with Sarah's help, he'd realized that holding on to that bitterness only poisoned his own happiness. "Your mother called," Sarah said. "She's bringing that apple pie the girls love so much for dinner." Dave smiled. His mother-in-law had, against all odds, become one of his strongest supporters. After initially taking Fiona in following the collapse, she'd eventually helped her daughter find independence while maintaining a close relationship with Dave and the girls. She'd been the first to welcome Sarah into the family. The doorbell rang, and Dave went to answer it. Fiona stood on the porch, punctual as always these days. She looked healthy, clear-eyed and composed in a way she hadn't been during their marriage. "They're out back," Dave said, stepping aside to let her in. "They've been excited all morning about showing you their science fair projects." "Thank you," Fiona said quietly. There was genuine gratitude in her voice, not just for today's visit, but for the second chance she'd been given. As they walked through the house, Dave caught sight of the family photo hanging in the hallway. Himself, Sarah, the 3 children, and yes, even Fiona at Rita's last birthday party. It wasn't a conventional family portrait, but it represented something hard-won and precious: peace. Out in the garden, the girls spotted their mother and ran toward her with delighted shrieks. Dave watched as Fiona knelt down to embrace them, her eyes briefly meeting his over their shoulders with a look of appreciation. He felt Sarah's hand slip into his. In the wreckage of betrayal, he'd found a better life than he could have imagined, not despite the pain, but perhaps because of it. He'd learned about forgiveness, not for Fiona's sake, but for his own and for his daughters. And in doing so, he'd discovered that happiness sometimes arrives through the most unexpected doors. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.